Most men think the hardest part about divorce is signing the papers. That once the ink dries, the fights stop, the stress fades, and life somehow gets simpler. But that's not how it works. The truth is, signing the papers doesn't bring peace. It starts a new kind of war. One that's quieter, lonelier, and a lot more personal. What no one tells you is that divorce doesn't just take your partner. It takes parts of you, pieces you didn't realize were attached. And once they're gone, you can't just go back and get them. There's a version of this story most men never share. The one where you're sitting in your car, alone, wondering who you even are without the title of husband. The one where freedom feels more like freefall. Where the silence isn't peaceful, it's deafening. This video isn't about blame. It's not about whose fault the divorce was. It's about the blind spots, the things men only realize when it's too late to go back. Because no matter how ready you think you are to end a marriage, there are always truths that hit harder after the fact. Here are 7 things divorced men wish they knew before signing the papers. And if you're anywhere near that decision, these might be the things you'll wish someone told you. You don't just lose a partner, you lose your identity. That's the part no one warns you about. For years, maybe decades, your life has revolved around roles you didn't think much about. Husband, provider, protector, maybe father. It becomes second nature. The routines, the responsibilities, the quiet comfort of knowing where you fit. And then suddenly, it's gone. The house feels different. The meals are quieter. Even your name feels unfamiliar when no one's calling it with warmth anymore. At first, you might enjoy the space. You tell yourself this is what freedom feels like. But pretty soon, it hits you. You don't know who you are without someone to show up for. You start questioning everything. What you want, what you need, even what you like doing on a random Saturday afternoon. It's like waking up in someone else's life with no map and no compass. The scariest part isn't being alone. It's realizing that you've spent so long being part of something else that you forgot how to just be you. And rebuilding that identity? It's not a weekend project. It takes time, intention, and a level of honesty most men aren't used to sitting with. But that wasn't the only surprise. Divorce doesn't end the emotional war, it starts it. Most men think the drama dies with the marriage. That once the signatures are in place, the stress will disappear and the fighting will finally stop. But what actually happens is more subtle and sometimes more painful. The tension doesn't leave. It just shifts. It moves from loud arguments to quiet resentment, from shouted words across the living room to cold, calculated texts about who gets the kids on Thanksgiving. You think you'll feel lighter, but instead, there's this heavy pressure in your chest that shows up at strange times, in the middle of the night, during a drive, while folding laundry that's now only yours. You start reliving every fight, wondering if you could have said something differently, done something differently. And then the guilt kicks in, or the bitterness, or both. If kids are involved, it's even messier. You're still tied to someone you thought you were finally free from, and now every exchange, every pickup, every birthday, every parent-teacher meeting feels like a performance. You try to stay calm, but deep down, you know you're still stuck in the emotional loop. The only difference is you're playing by new rules, and they don't always feel fair. You may have left the marriage, but the emotional aftermath, that part is just getting started. And soon, you realize something else you didn't expect. Your friends will vanish, and no one prepares you for the silence. At first, it's subtle. The group texts slow down. The invitations stop showing up. The phone calls become shorter, more awkward. People say they're giving you space, but what they're really doing is stepping back because they don't know what to say, or because your divorce makes them uncomfortable, or because they're choosing sides. Sometimes it's all three. The ones you thought would always be there, some of them disappear without a word. Others stick around, but the conversations change. You're no longer the couple they invited to dinners, vacations, or holidays. Now you're the single guy, the odd number, the one people aren't sure how to include. You start noticing how many of your friendships were built around your marriage. And once that's gone, the connections start crumbling. You don't just lose a partner. You lose a community. You find yourself spending more nights alone than you expected, realizing how loud the quiet can be when you don't have anyone checking in. And while independence might sound empowering, isolation can sneak up on you fast. The truth is, divorce doesn't just shrink your home, it shrinks your world. And when it does, you'll find yourself facing the kind of loneliness that doesn't go away with background noise. But even that wasn't the biggest surprise waiting on the other side. Freedom doesn't feel the way you thought it would. Before the divorce, it was all you could think about, the idea of finally having space, no more arguments, no more compromises, just peace. You imagined waking up without tension, doing whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. And for a little while, it feels like that. The silence is soothing. The open schedule is a relief. The lack of conflict feels like air after holding your breath for too long. But then something strange happens. The freedom starts to feel like weight. There's no one to check in with, no plans to adjust, no reason to hurry home. The weekends stretch too long. The empty bed stops feeling like a luxury and starts to feel like a reminder. You thought you'd feel liberated, but what you feel is unanchored, untethered. And what no one tells you is that structure, even if it felt stifling, gave your life shape. Now, every day is a blank page, and you're stuck holding the pen without a clue what to write. You miss the routines, the little obligations, even the small annoyances that used to frustrate you, because they gave you purpose. This is when a lot of men realize that freedom isn't always the prize. Sometimes it's a test, and without something grounding you, it's easy to drift. And in that drift, another truth starts to rise, one you've spent years pushing down. You're more emotionally attached than you admitted. Maybe you spent years convincing yourself the marriage was over long before the paperwork. Maybe you told your friends and yourself that you were fine, that you'd already moved on. But then it hits you, not all at once, but in quiet moments when you least expect it. A song comes on the radio. A scent in the grocery store reminds you of her shampoo. You see a couple holding hands at a red light, and something inside you stings. That's when you realize, no matter how unhappy you were, you still cared. You still had roots there. You don't spend years building a life with someone and walk away untouched. There were memories, routines, shared jokes, inside looks, a history written in everyday moments. And losing that feels like mourning a part of yourself. A lot of men try to tough it out, bury the grief, stay busy, pretend it doesn't hurt. But that pain has a way of showing up anyway, in your sleep, in your mood, in your silence. You thought divorce was the clean cut, but love doesn't bleed out that easily. And the longer you pretend you're not hurting, the longer it takes to actually heal. The emotional aftermath doesn't care how strong you think you are. It only cares how honest you're willing to be. But even as you're wrestling with your own emotions, there's another force pulling you down, one that's far more practical and far more brutal. Money problems don't end. They multiply. Before the divorce, maybe things felt tight. But afterward, tight becomes tense. Then tense becomes terrifying. Most men walk into divorce thinking they'll just split the assets, pay a little support, and move on. What they don't realize is that the financial hit doesn't just come once, it comes in waves. First, it's the legal fees, then the moving costs, then setting up a new place from scratch, furniture, deposits, insurance, bills you didn't even think about before. If there are kids, the expenses never stop. Child support, school costs, healthcare, birthdays. And if alimony's involved, that check feels like a monthly reminder of a life you're no longer living. You start noticing how quickly money disappears, how the cushion you thought you had turns into dust. Maybe you always let your partner handle the budget. Now, you're scrambling to figure out how much you can spend on groceries without dipping into rent. The financial freedom you expected feels more like survival mode. And what hits hardest isn't just the numbers, it's the loss of confidence. You feel behind. You feel unstable. You feel like you should have planned better, like you should have seen it coming. But while money stress can break your sleep, there's something else that can break you even more quietly. The way you try to move on without really healing. Healing doesn't come with time. It comes with work. That's one of the cruelest myths men believe after divorce. That if you just wait it out, keep moving, give it enough time, the pain will fade and everything will go back to normal. But time isn't medicine. It's just distance. And if you don't do the work, the real uncomfortable work, that distance just fills with denial, bitterness or numbness. A lot of men isolate after divorce. They stop reaching out. They distract themselves with work, hookups, drinking, anything to stay busy and avoid the silence. But the silence always catches up. And when it does, it forces a question most men don't want to answer. Who am I now? Not as a husband, not as someone's other half, but as me. Healing means facing that question. It means being honest about the grief, the regret, the resentment. Not to punish yourself, but to understand yourself. It means seeking support, even if it feels weak. Talking to someone, journaling, going to therapy, rebuilding your routines, your health, your sense of purpose piece by piece. Because without that effort, you don't grow, you just harden. You don't move on, you stall. And one day, you wake up realizing that the divorce didn't break you. You just never rebuilt. But here's the part that most divorced men never say out loud. The final realization that hits the hardest. Divorce isn't just the end of a relationship. It's a reset of your entire life. And most men walk into it thinking they understand what they're giving up. But the truth is, you don't see the full cost until it's already behind you. The identity you lose. The silence you never expected. The emotional weight that doesn't show up until the papers are signed and the door is closed. You think you'll feel free. But what you often feel is unprepared for the loneliness, the uncertainty, the work it takes to rebuild a life from the ground up. And the hardest part? Most of the damage happens slowly, quietly, while you're telling yourself you're fine. But here's the thing. None of this means your life is over. It means you're starting again. And this time, you get to do it with open eyes. You get to know the cost of disconnection. You get to choose who you become. Not for anyone else, but for yourself. If you're thinking about divorce or still healing from one, don't wait for the pain to surprise you. Prepare for it. Face it. Use it. Because regret will either build walls or push you to rebuild something better. And if no one's told you yet, you're not weak for feeling lost. You're human. And it's never too late to find your way forward.